happens, just charge. It works. Charge!
Well, this is awesome.
Why is it Japanese?
Oh, wow, that was a good grenade.
Throwing mine back. I just killed that machine gun nest with a headshot. First try.
Yep, I dropped it.
Hey folks, Dave here, and welcome to Beyond the Wire. This is a recently released, semi-realistic, leaning more towards realistic, World War I FPS game. And it's developed and published by Offworld Studios. Offworld is the developers and publishers of both Beyond the Wire here, as well as the very well-known Squad FPS game, and they're also the publisher of the spin-off title Postscriptum, which is a World War II version of essentially the same game mechanic concept seen in all three of these games. With the release of Beyond the Wire here, they now have three completely different eras covered, and I think that the squad formula, as applied here to Beyond the Wire, does continue to hold up, with its emphasis on large open maps, squad communication, all the way up through the command structure, as well as quite a few player constructible obstacles and objectives across the maps. It's definitely not a perfect combination of the World War I history and the squad formula, but it does hold up pretty well, although, as you guys have probably already heard about this game, the player count is already struggling after launch. I'm talking about it's only about 100 players a night on weeknights. That's not even a full server most of the time as people are coming and going. That is an improvement though over the game's early access numbers. It was stuck in early access for almost 2 years now, and with a relatively slow development update set, the player count there in early access had dropped off to almost nothing, about 2 or 3 players per night before the game officially launched. Hopefully it will continue to grow because there is some good stuff here. So let's dig in and take a look at the good and the bad. And I'm going to save the bad for last because I do think that this game does more things well than bad. The first thing this game does right is pretty common in this tactical FPS genre, but that is large open scale. Frequently these maps are absolutely massive and you're going to spend easily an hour fighting across them. You have 100 players total, 50 for each team, and that tends to fill these maps out pretty well without ensuring that you get your face shot right in the eyeball every time you peek your head out of the trench. Both your player's survivability and the atmosphere overall are really boosted by how good the incredible sound is. Yes, enemies can hit you from really far away with those accurate bolt-action rifles, and with these war-torn maps, they can be hiding prone in a pile of rubble, and you're just never going to see them. But if you hear them take a shot and miss, odds are between the excellent positional sound and the reverb and additional effects, you'll be able to pinpoint where that shot came from and take them out before they get a second chance to get you. Team leaders blowing their whistles as everyone charges out of the trench with swords drawn is just really atmospheric, although it's not helped by the stiff animations, which we'll talk more about later. The command structure radio system, as seen in Squad, returns here, and while it isn't perfectly immersive, as the comms are very, very clear and everybody is essentially carrying a handheld radio well before its time in their back pocket, it does allow the gameplay to work well. And actually I found myself talking more to my command structure in game and my squad in game than I was to my friend Dan here, who was playing with me. He was in my squad, so we just ended up using the in-game voice comms quite often instead of just sitting by our lonesome over on Discord. Team play is essential for games like this, so it's great to see that the comm systems are holding up here.
If you're pushing to Charlie, put on the gas mask. Gas is coming in.
They're trying to attack us on the right from the gas.
Another big plus for this game is there's a large amount of weapons and faction variety. There's 4 total factions already here at launch with all of the weapons for each country that you would expect to go along with them. You're going to be fighting across 10 different maps, and even though I've played for hours and hours, I've still only seen less than half of them, so definitely a solid amount of map content here at the 1.0 launch. There's also an excellent gore and blood system. It startled me the first time that a soldier was blown to literal bits right in front of me. And there's even some effects for destruction for basic stuff like sandbags. Overall, the gore, blood, and slight minor prop destruction really helps to make the maps feel more realistic and more dynamic overall. I was also really impressed by the movable field artillery and how well my team used those artillery pieces that you can actually move around the field to win the fights. As usual, there's plenty of call-ins from off-map artillery that your commander and squad leaders can work together to call in, but those actual controllable field artillery pieces were essential as we pushed objectives. Multiple times I saw intense fights over those field artillery positions as enemies tried to push them and take them out, as our guys got them into just the right position to support the next charge out of the trench. They didn't seem overpowered. I wasn't killed constantly by those artillery pieces, but they did seem to be an important part of the match, and it was just fun to see those back and forth fights over them. With all of these pieces working together, veterans of games like Hell Let Loose or Squad are going to feel pretty at home here. Everything just tends to work well together, and you'll be talking to your squad and pushing objectives together in no time. It's very accessible for anybody who has any kind of experience in this genre. Alright, so here's the downsides. This does not feel like a 1.0 release. The game has quite a few rough edges, and I have a feeling that this game was rushed to a 1.0 launch to try and revive the player base. I bet you we're going to see some free weekends and some pretty steep discounts, probably within the first month. The overall performance in the game is all over the place. My computer can easily handle any game out there at max settings and 4K now, but this game was hitching and dropping frames everywhere. I started out on epic settings at 4K, and although my frame rate was between 60 and 90, the frame timings were just awful. And for those of you that aren't familiar, that's just how evenly your video card is delivering frames for your monitor. The game was hitching like crazy, and the longer I played, the worse the hitching got. I think the game might have a pretty serious memory leak, because by the end of my play session, a good explosion would cause my game to completely hang for about a half a second. The gameplay is also hindered by a very stiff player controller. That's how your player feels in first person, how their arms and legs move, and how your player animates overall there in first person. That's a very important part of a first person shooter. And again, the player camera and controller feels way rougher than Squad or Post-Scriptum here in Beyond the Wire. This was also a big issue with the other WW1 FPS for Done. The player camera and controller just felt very stiff and jarring as it bumped over different bits of terrain as you tried to run around. And here in Beyond the Wire, you have that same effect where you're constantly feeling like you're getting stuck on stuff, your camera is jittering and bumping around, and it never feels smooth. And your field of view feels quite wonky as well, with your arms swinging in an awkward way, and it just doesn't look or feel great to control your player character. Along with that, I think while the weapon ballistics feel pretty solid, and I got some really satisfying kills with almost all of the weapons, the balancing sway of the weapons is very overdone. Pistols are almost useless unless you're just hip firing them. Trying to aim almost anything after you've run results in a pretty frustrating amount of sway. And again, I realize that this is for balance, but I think I'd rather be able to aim my shots a little bit more consistently and then deal with people getting those quick snap headshots with their mouse and keyboard. There's probably a better middle ground for the weapon sway and controls here. Beyond that though, like I said, the ballistics themselves, how the weapons fire and handle, really does feel great and satisfying, as you would really hope for in a tactical shooter like this. There also are apparently vehicles, but with one active server with its own custom map rotation, I never actually saw them, and with only one server being active a night, people who buy the game may never see those vehicles at all. I believe they're supposed to be transports as well as full-on tanks, but I couldn't tell you, never actually saw them. Despite feeling like a rushed early access launch, and despite I think the damage that early access did to the game's enthusiasm wave and player base overall, there is a core of a really good game here. Maybe not an amazing game, but a solid take on the squad formula in World War I. Beyond some aggressive sales, I'm not sure what the devs can do to keep this game on life support, but whatever they do, I hope they do it fast. For now, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.